So today I'm going to finally be doing another Media of the Moment video. Media of the Moment is a series that I created on my channel about this time last year. Essentially in 2016 I stopped doing TBRs and I created Media of the Moment as kind of a way to keep y'all updated on what I'm reading, but also on what I'm watching, what I'm listening to, stuff like that. And I think the last one of these that I made was all the way back in the summer, so obviously I'm not going to catch y'all up on everything that's been going on, but I'll be catching you up on what I've recently been reading, watching, and listening to. And I do really want to make this series a priority this year because since I'm not doing TBRs, I do really want to keep y'all updated on what I'm reading, and I also really love talking about whatever I'm currently watching or listening to as well. So I'm going to start out with books, and this is also going to be a bit of a channel update as well. So I want to say that the last wrap up I did was at the end of November, and I didn't do a ton of reading at the end of the year. I only read 2 books, but I did read those 2 books and I have yet to wrap them up. And in the new year, I'm going to be changing the way I do wrap-ups. So in terms of the channel update, I'm going to be changing the way that I do my wrap-ups. I kind of wanted to do this last year, but I didn't commit to it, and I just went ahead doing the monthly wrap-ups. But this year, I'm going to be doing a wrap-up every 5 or so books that I read. Typically, it will probably be every 5 books, but if I do read a lot of volumes of a manga, I may not do it every 5 since those are pretty quick to wrap up. So I don't know, it'll typically be every 5 books. That being said though, I read 2 books at the end of 2016 that I have yet to wrap up, and I've read 1 book so far this year, so I'm not sure how I'm going to divide up that wrap up, but I'm definitely going to be wrapping up all 3 of those books sometime in the next few weeks. I don't know, I haven't been reading a ton. But really quickly, I will go ahead and catch you up on my first read of the year, and that was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was one that my best friend Sarah recommended to me, and I picked it up at my local public library, and I really enjoyed it. Not going to really talk about it any more in depth since I am going to be doing a wrap-up, but it was a really cool dystopian novel, and I would definitely recommend that you check it out, especially since there's going to be a Hulu series. And then past that, I'm not sure what I'm going to read. I have yet to start my next book, but I have a few that I'm considering, so I'll just go ahead and show those really quickly. So the first of those is Sounds of Fear and Wonder by Janet Halfyard. This is a book that actually came into the library where I work, and it was a new book, and when I picked it up and I just glanced at the back, I was super intrigued, and so I went ahead and checked it out. This is a non-fiction book that analyzes the use of music in cult TV shows, and what really stood out to me was that it mentions stuff like Supernatural and Buffy, and so I immediately was like, ooh, I want to read that. I don't know if I'll necessarily pick this up immediately since I have it all semester unless someone else puts a hold on it, but I want to check this out really soon because this is really intriguing to me. I'm also considering continuing on in the Monster manga series. This is volume 6, which is the next one that I need to read. My main hesitation here is that so far all the books that I've mentioned have been library books, and one of my main resolutions for the year was to utilize my public library a little bit less because I've been ignoring the books on my actual shelves. So I think I should probably pick up something that I actually own, but I also kind of really want to continue the series. There are also some audiobooks that I'm considering listening to since I do listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks when I'm going to school and work. So I might pick up Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy since I have that on audiobook. There are also a couple other audiobooks that I've considered getting. I don't know, my reading has not really been a priority over the past few weeks, which I'll explain in a minute. But yeah, those are just the ones that I have floating around in my head. So that's it for the books. So now on to the main attraction in my mind, which is the stuff that I've been watching. So this week I've been doing a slight rewatch of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars Season 2 because I was watching it as it aired. I don't have Logo, but I was watching it like every day after it was posted online, and I stopped mid-season for some reason. I stopped keeping up with it. I'm really bad about keeping up with ongoing shows, but I just wanted to go ahead and go back and finish the season and listen to the podcasts that the reality TV wrap-up people did. So that's what I've been watching over the past few days. But there is a TV show that I've been watching over the past like almost month, and it has basically consumed my entire life, which is really pathetic, but I am obsessed. And I just want to go ahead and apologize to every single human that follows me on Twitter or has my Snapchat name, because that is basically all I've been posting about for the past almost month, and it's gotten to really like awful, horrible, obsessive levels. Typically, I'm someone whose favorite TV shows or movies or songs or whatever don't change very rapidly, and if I do start enjoying something, it takes a while for it to get up really high on that list unless something like really out there happens, and something really out there has happened. This might possibly take the #1 slot on my favorite TV shows of all time. I'm not even kidding. And that beautiful, wonderful TV show is The Genius. So if you've never heard of The Genius, you are in the vast majority of English-speaking people, because this is actually a South Korean reality TV show. So you're probably wondering, Kristen, how on earth did you discover and get obsessed with a random South Korean reality show? And the answer to that, my friends, is Rob Has a Podcast. I've talked in the past about Rob Has a Podcast when I was talking about Big Brother, but I love Rob Has a Podcast. It's probably my favorite podcast alongside all of the other affiliated podcasts like the RuPaul's Drag Race wrap-up that I mentioned. And I tend to listen to the Big Brother wrap-ups a lot. And there are a few guys on that podcast who are big fans of The Genius, and so they talk about it quite often, and they kept saying how amazing it was, and eventually I caved. I watched the first episode of the show all the way back in the summer, and although I enjoyed it, I hadn't yet acclimated myself to the subtitle reading, and since it is one of those shows that you have to fully immerse yourself in and watch the subtitles, I didn't want to devote a ton of time to watching it, so I put it aside to watch later, and that later began in December. Because Rob from Rob Has a Podcast finally started watching The Genius because everyone kept telling him he should watch it, and he started doing like an audiobook kind of podcast type thing with Stephen Fishbach, talking episode by episode about the first season. And that kind of just reignited my interest in the series, and I went ahead and rewatched the first episode, and it clicked even better with me the second time, and it really pushed me to continue on the show. And then I just developed the obsession. And I just realized that I've yet to even explain what the show is. It is a reality show, like I said, and it features 13 contestants every season, and these people are either celebrities or really well known in their field, or someone really smart who has passed an open audition. So in The Genius, every week the contestants show up to play a game. Every week there is a main match and a death match. The main match determines who has to go to the death match, and the death match is a 1-versus-1 game to determine who gets eliminated. One person is eliminated at the end of every episode, and the remaining players return the next week to repeat the process, which eventually culminates in a 1-versus-1 battle in the finale to determine who will be the winner of The Genius. And I'm gonna stop there in terms of explaining The Genius, mostly because I have yet to finish the show, and once I do, I plan on making a video talking about The Genius, explaining it further, and talking about why you should watch it, because you should watch it. It is brilliant. The first season is super easy to find because it's just on regular old YouTube with English subtitles. It's really, really easy to find. The last few seasons are a little bit more difficult because they're on Dailymotion, but it's pretty easy to find a link. I'll put one down in the description to the page that has all of the links to all the episodes on it. But yeah, as you can tell, I've just gotten completely obsessed with the show. Not only is it so brilliant and clever, but it's also just so entertaining and fun to watch, and it just makes it just such a good show. I cannot say enough good things about this show. It's so genius. I actually just finished season 3 last night, and I'm going to be starting season 4 later today, and season 4 is unfortunately, as of right now, the final season. It appears that it will permanently be the final season, but some people have kind of hinted at potential possible for more seasons. I don't know. It sounds like this is going to be the last season, which is really a bummer because it's so good. So yeah, I'm just completely obsessed with the show. It is probably my new favorite show of all time. It's just so amazing, and I've fallen head over heels in love with it. So I was about to say that I'm shutting up about The Genius, but I'm only partially shutting up about The Genius because I'm moving on to the podcast that I've been listening to, and a couple of those are related to The Genius. And the first one of those is one I've already mentioned, and that is the RuPaul's Drag Race offshoot of Rob Has a Podcast. They did podcasts after every single episode of All Stars Season 2, so I've been watching an episode, listening to a podcast, on and on and on. And then the other podcasts that I've been listening to are related to The Genius. The first one was Genius Cast with Scott and Mike, which I listened to throughout the majority of Season 1 because they don't have stuff on Seasons 2 and 3 yet. And then I've also been listening to the Dom and Colin podcast because they've done like full season retrospectives for Seasons 1 through 3. But both of those podcasts have episode by episode coverage of Season 4 of The Genius, so I'm definitely going to have a lot more material to listen to now that I've started the final season of the show. And on the topic of things I've been watching, I ashamedly have not yet watched any of this new season of Sherlock or any of a series of Unfortunate Events, because all I've been doing is watching The Genius. I will watch both those once I get done with The Genius, and potentially after rewatching The Genius, because I have a problem, like I said, but I do plan on getting to both of those. I just haven't yet because I've been binge watching The Genius. So that's about it for the stuff that I've been reading, watching, and listening to, but I did want to briefly touch on my blog really quick before I wrap this up, because I've been doing stuff on there finally for the first time in like 3 months. And yes, some of it is related to The Genius. I so far have worked on my rankings of the Season 1 players and the Season 1 main matches. I'm not sure if both of those or one of those will be up by the time that I post this, but if they are, I'll link them either up in the cards or down in the description. But apart from that, book related, I also posted my rankings of all of the books that I read in 2016, so that will also be linked somewhere either up there or down there. And I know I said this in a few videos right around break, but I do plan on getting back to Specialis Revelio, my Harry Potter analysis blog, fairly soon. Like I said, I was first derailed by working on my novel in November, and then I got derailed by watching The Genius over break, so I haven't been focusing on that very much, but once I get The Genius out of my system, which might take a very long time, I do intend on getting back to that blog. So that is about it for this Media of the Moment video. Like I said, I definitely plan on making these much more frequently in 2017, mostly because I think that this is the best way to keep y'all updated on what I'm reading, as well as getting to talk about what I'm also watching and listening to. Every other week might be a little too frequent given that I only put out a couple videos a week tops, but maybe once a month or once every few weeks, something along those lines. If you'll want to keep more updated on what I'm reading, watching, listening to, my Twitter is probably the best place to do that, because until like 6 months ago, I wasn't much of a Twitter person, but now I'm on there all the time. So Twitter is probably the best place to keep updated with what I'm doing. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. I'm not even kidding when I say that my obsession is bad. Like, I legitimately have considered starting to learn Korean because I've gotten so obsessed with the show. And also the other day I overheard two people greeting each other in Korean, and my brain just automatically translated it without even having to think. And yeah, I've started to learn Korean phrases now. I've watched the show way too much. Fighting! I have a problem.